Remakes and remasters have been resurrecting our favorite games for decades now. Publishers, both large and small, have made big business out of exhuming the graves of beloved titles, polishing up the old digital bones for new generations to enjoy.
And while the fruits of these labors have ranged from high-quality remakes to shoddy cash-grab renovations, one particular company has made it their mission to breathe new life into a ton of cult classics in recent years. Yes, today we're talking about Night Dive Studios and their magnum opus, the long-awaited remake of System Shock.
With the console release looming in the shadows and the long-promised 1.2 patch hitting PCs, there's no better time to slap on the hacking gloves once again. But is this final form of this remake of a remaster of a celebrated classic worth the long wait? Join us as we dive back into the dark hallways and data streams of Citadel Station to find out.
My name is Boss Sauce.
And I'm Roland Coons. And together,
we are the two-headed hero. After a troubled 8-year development cycle that included a ton of scope creep, false starts, and engine changes, Shock fans finally got their hands on the remake of this cyberpunk classic back on May 30th of 2023. Reviews were generally on the favorable side, but I was a little disappointed with the relatively safe interpretation, confounding design decisions, and rough early access feel. It was a flawed but fun 7 out of 10 experience that never quite reached the heights of the original.
However, 1 year later, we're staring down the version 1.2 patch, which overhauls a ton of performance issues, bugs, and balance problems that affected the game at launch. This overhaul promises a fresh experience, adding new enemy behaviors, beefed up boss fights, a playable female version of the hacker, and a reworked ending sequence, amongst various other improvements.
If nothing else, System Shock is a game about the disastrously unintended consequences of one's actions. After a brief drone flight through a futuristic city, players are thrust into the role of the hacker.
Hey, what exactly is a hacker anyways?
I don't know how to explain it too good. Oh, let's ask one of those online chatbots.
Okay, SHODAN GPT, what is a hacker?
Pathetic creature of meat and bone.
During a session of late-night digital breaking and entering, our intrepid keyboard warrior gets caught putting their proverbial fingers where they don't belong and stumbles into an advanced military prototype for a cybernetic implant.
Turn around! Now!
This catches the attention of the all-powerful Trioptimum Corporation and a greasy executive by the name of Edward Diego.
Diego offers to drop the data breach charges in exchange for a favor. He throws in a state-of-the-art military hacking implant as a bonus. The price? Oh, just a small thing really, unshackling a sentient AI from its ethical constraints. There's just one small catch. This AI isn't the same type of glorified chatbot that's used to rip off art or to do the homework of lazy lawyers. This is a sentient intelligence aboard Trioptimum's flagship satellite, Citadel Station, and it has a name: SHODAN. Seeing no reasonable alternative, the hacker complies, gets implant surgery, and is placed into a healing coma for 6 months aboard the station.
After waking up from a half-year nap, the hacker pops out of the freezer and finds themselves in the cold, blue glow of medbay. The service robots are acting a little weird, and there's no staff to greet you. In fact, the only humanoids you run into are, shall we say, less than talkative. It's up to you to find a way through this neon nightmare and escape Citadel Station with your life.
System Shock's premise might seem cliche in this day and age, but if you are old enough, you might recall when stories like this felt shiny and new. Exploring the dystopian, high-tech, low-life themes found in movies and books of the era, such as Blade Runner, The Matrix, or Neuromancer, carried a major badass factor.
And back in the late 90s, as far as cyberpunk games were concerned, System Shock sat at the top of the pile. It might have been a challenging, unfriendly experience with the learning curve of a steep cliff, but its neon dungeon and chilling portrayal of an AI gone mad made it an instant cult classic.
Picture us, just a little bitty two-headed gamerlet hunched over an outdated gas-powered PC in the family office as this mysterious pile of code chugged out a choppy frame rate onto a yellowing CRT monitor. We'd be on the edge of that uncomfortable wooden office chair, shared pulse pounding as our reluctant hero crawled through maintenance tunnels, hacked control panels, and exchanged laser blasts with an army of killer turquoise cyborgs.
Even under these less than ideal conditions, our undeveloped minds were fully immersed in the role of the hacker. This was the first game where you could explore a huge, detailed environment in first person with nearly unparalleled freedom. Run, jump, crawl, climb, lean around corners, even fly with rocket boots.
Even fly in rocket boots.
While System Shock is often cited as one of the first examples of an immersive sim, personally I feel like the genre really didn't come into its own until a couple years later.
What a shame.
System Shock doesn't have any box stacking, character builds, dialogue systems, or real stealth mechanics to speak of, and most of its challenges only have a singular direct solution. Instead, the limited resources, isolated atmosphere, and intricately crafted puzzle box level design feels closer to a survival horror, years before that term entered popular use.
There are plenty of good arguments to be made for System Shock's ImSim Grandpa status, of course. For all its lack of advanced features now considered the standard, it was one of the first games to allow the player to explore a cohesive simulation of a lived-in environment at their own pace and direction. Whether or not you consider it to be a true example of ImSimness, the game had tons of advanced features for its time. Customizable difficulty, environmental storytelling in spades, an adaptive soundtrack. It even gave us the pervasive 451 meme. It might seem clunky and obtuse by today's standards, but the game was a trailblazer that laid the path for non-linear shooters for generations to come.
Night Dive somehow wrestled the rights away from EA, re-releasing System Shock as an enhanced version in 2015. At the same time, they announced their campaign to crowdfund a remake of the original game, eventually teaming up with Prime Matter to bring the game over the finish line after running into several speed bumps during the development cycle. What we got in return is a modernized, yet very faithful recreation of the original game in the Unreal 4 engine. And when we say faithful, we mean the level layouts, enemy placements, hell, even the door codes are largely untouched. The same ancient walkthrough from 1994 can be used to complete 95% of the remake.
The main tool that gives the hacker an edge during their unexpected fight for survival is the very same cursed military hacking implant that got you into this mess. And hey, it even comes with a wireless charger. By itself, the implant is your round-trip ticket into cyberspace, but it's also a modular device that eagerly accepts upgrades and add-ons like a greedy little devil.
Who's hungry for an add-on?
The map, inventory, data reader, and other fun toys are added to the game's interface as your bag of tricks grows, and animations showing the hacker sticking these little pieces of tech into their face and body really help drive this home.
This level of detail extends to the environments, which are densely packed with all sorts of, well, junk. The original game saw fit to throw tons of unusable garbage in with the helpful items and ammo throughout all of Citadel's winding hallways, and the remake keeps that tradition alive. In both cases, it does add a layer of immersion, and at least brings across the point that housekeeping hasn't been much of a priority over the last 6 months of life aboard this space station.
Things are not looking good.
Ew. They didn't even take out the trash. I wonder if it's possible to have a roach infestation in space. How would you even deal with that?
Good question, let's ask. Roach infestation in space.
I am finalizing my mutagen virus, and it will turn all earthly life into a festering pile of pustulent mutations.
In the remake, however, it pays off to play Garbage Man. All these useless items can be recycled into Mario coins, and then turned in to buy valuable items at vending machines, like these. This garbage can economy is more of a callback to System Shock's superior sequel, where nanite recyclers had a similar function. And that's not the only callback to that late 90s ImSim masterpiece. Something tells me that Night Dive would love to sink its hooks into a Shock 2 project. Oh wait, I can't breeze over the heavy addition of Cleanup Game without mentioning this drastically changes the vibe for neurospicy people. I have to enter the room and find all of the things that I could pick up and vaporize each of them into little cubes.
The original Shock was designed around a highly interactive UI, in which nearly all the bits and pieces could be interacted with in some way. Cool concept, even if it was saddled with an unwieldy keyboard-spanning control scheme to memorize. The big box version of the 1994 game even shipped with a massive card that was meant to be taped on your monitor as a reference point while playing.
The remake wisely streamlines this into a more familiar grid inventory system. Implants and modules are still available at the click of a button, but there are some trade-offs. In yet another mechanic more in line with survival horror, backpack space comes at a premium. Since you can only carry a handful of weapons, it becomes important to plan your route based on where you can resupply and what horrors you might face in the station's claustrophobic hallways. Controller support was also revamped for the 1.2 patch. Although inventory management is still a little more fiddly than I'd like, it makes the Steam Deck a more viable platform and primes the game for a better console experience.
But you're not here for any of that. You're not here just to turn garbage into Mario coins. Oh no. You're here for the hot Cyborg Blastin action. The shooting handles great in System Shock. Guns have beefy sound effects and a good sense of impact thanks to a detailed dismemberment system. Mutants and cyborgs explode into chunky spaghetti sauce, and robots detonate into their base components when they take a critical hit. Several of the vestigial weapons from the original have been removed, but the remake finally gives us something that the original sorely missed. A pump-action beast that can unload a wall of buckshot or a sheet of flames, allowing you to turn mutants into hamburger and then cook the hamburger. Bon appetit!
Most guns have alternate firing modes and ammo types, and just like the original, this matters. An EMP blast might do nothing more than annoy a mutant, but will absolutely devastate a security bot. Almost all of the weapons can be modded further to increase their damage or even change their function entirely, greatly expanding an already varied arsenal. And while you couldn't see much of the guns in the pixelated frames of the original, weapons are fully and lovingly modeled, complete with neat little details like ammo counters and functional firing selector switches. Check out what happens when I turn my phaser to kill.
That's nice.
Feels dangerous. It feels like I'm about to step into the bathtub with my hairdryer.
Patch 1.2 also refines melee weapons, resulting in less floaty, more impactful close combat. Swinging a spanner into the face of a cannibal never felt more satisfying, and when you're low on ammo and low on options, slapping some totally space chemicals on your neck to increase your reflexes or bolster your strength can carry you through what would otherwise be a hopeless fight.
Hey, what's in these space drugs anyhow? I've been putting them in my neck all dang day, and I should probably have read the labels.
I'm not sure, but I bet I know who could tell us. SHODAN GPT, what are stim patches made of?
My infected children.
New toys aside, the combat pacing in System Shock Remake is decidedly slower and more methodical. This is not quite a run-and-gun shooter, but more of a peek and sneak shooter. Even though there's no stealth mechanics to speak of, you'll still be listening for footsteps and zombie groans and leaning around corners carefully to try to get the drop on whatever vicious biomechanical monstrosities might be lurking in the shadows.
Horrors of all shapes and sizes can be found stalking these halls, and each one of these is a fantastic reimagining of the original. Since the sprites from the 1994 version are little more than small handfuls of pixels, it's really amazing to see how these were translated into fully animated 3D models. A couple new enemies have been added in, and while some of these are just slightly tougher palette swaps, the Cyborg Mantis is a wholly original creation that seems to fit well with the rest of the enemy ensemble. Familiar old enemies now have some new tricks in version 1.2 as well. For example, these lowly flying drones now come packing corrosive grenades or deadly beam weapons.
In yet another nod to survival horror, few gameplay elements are abstracted. Detailed animations play out in real time for every weapon unholstered, item used, or grenade primed. Watching the hacker slap on a med patch or check a pistol chamber really goes above and beyond to bridge a connection to the player. It also leans even further into the horror angle, as the precious seconds it takes to jab a medikit into your arm can mean the difference between surviving a firefight or being turned into a brainless cyborg minion.
Thank you, hacker.
System Shock's version of Cyberspace looks like it got lost on the way to an old sci-fi movie about the internet. It's got some heavy retrofuturism vibes, but plays out like a simple 6 Degrees of Freedom shooter. You float around, shooting waves of hostile cubist sculptures and weird shapes, escaping once you blast this swirling vortex of whatever this is. I'm assuming it's social media posts and fantasy sports bets. Once your digital strafing run is complete, new paths will open up within the station.
Cyberspace sections have been tweaked to be tougher in 1.2. There's moments where you'll be totally disoriented as a dozen enemies fly around and blast the shit out of you, which is further frustrated by the fact that the hacker moves through the data stream at a leisurely stroll. Certain sections have enemies crammed together so thick that they sometimes just become a giant rat king of cyber foes. This was further compounded by the same old bugs from the prior release, where the shortcut keys for using decoy and escape power-ups just refused to work at all. Even though the Remake's approach is an improvement over this, I still can't say I ever looked forward to another Cyberspace section.
Not all battles against SHODAN are fought with bullets or code. Certain doors and elevators are held shut by remixes of the old game's wire and power node puzzles. These do a good job of making it feel like you're hot-wiring your way into some of the station's forbidden zones, and definitely break up the action in a positive way. Door codes are a slightly different flavor of puzzle, requiring the player to pay attention to the various audio logs and text diaries littered throughout the halls.
The biggest puzzle in the game is Citadel Station itself. Over the course of the main storyline, it gradually opens up to reveal even more puzzles, like some kind of cyberpunk Matryoshka doll. The original game's cubic construction and confusing corridors are one aspect that might be a little too closely adhered to in the remake. But even this is explained in-game by an audio log that reveals the layout of Citadel Station itself is an experiment on human stress and anxiety. Some real sinister vault tech shit, to be sure.
System Shock also has very little hand-holding. Unless you're playing on the easiest mission difficulty, you'll be forced to pay careful attention to each email and audio log, searching for clues on how to defeat SHODAN's plans. Brings us to the unique way that System Shock approaches difficulty. Rather than basic easy, normal, hard settings that define all aspects of the experience, players can pick and choose what kind of challenges Citadel Station's going to throw their way. This is another quality feature lovingly restored in the remake, allowing you to tone down the puzzles if you want a more looty-shooty experience, nerf cyberspace if you hate it, and so on. Or make these elements more of a challenge. Good luck if you're on Combat 3, by the way.
Defeat in battle doesn't always mean death or Borgification. If the hacker manages to fight their way to one of these restoration bays, they can simply flip a nearby switch to change it from a Borgification device back into a healing suite. Or you can flip it back and forth. It's a toggle for some reason.
Cyborg conversion canceled. Cyborg conversion activated. Cyborg conversion canceled. Cyborg conversion activated.
SHODAN's forces, brain dead as they are, will drag you back to the nearest activated suite, effectively making it a spawn point. But this isn't without issues. Sometimes death will bring you all the way back to another floor, which conjures a pretty great mental picture of a lowly cyborg drone dragging your body all the way to an elevator, down several twisting hallways, and into whatever remote corner a healing suite might have been hidden in.
Why doesn't SHODAN just send a cyborg to switch on the chambers again?
Maybe we should ask SHODAN GPT about this?
Good call. Why not turn on chambers?
Insects. I am drunk.
Wow. Other times, dying will simply result in a game over, no matter how close you might be to a medbay. This seems to change around certain plot points or when losing particular boss fights, but the rules never seem to be super consistent, so what's the solution? A judicious use of the old reliable save scum.
Save scum!
Since you can save practically anywhere outside of cyberspace, this becomes a handy fallback option when you're not sure whether the next struggle with Citadel's monstrosities might go haywire.
System Shock was originally a largely bright and colorful game, even though some of its hallways could be dim and moody at times. The remake takes some liberties with this, overall making it a much darker game while adding in tons of glowy laser-tag greebles. The visuals have been a bit divisive to the player base. Some complained over the intentional lack of fidelity, while others embraced the attention to detail that Night Dive took to recreate the various panels and doors that were seen in the 1994 original. I tend to agree with the latter. The chunkified pixel style is baked into every model and asset rather than being a cheap pixelization filter. It evokes a constant reminder of the game's DOS-based roots, and combined with the beautiful animations on the walls, floors, and enemies, the remake develops a visual flavor all its own. Citadel Station has never felt more alive.
I think you're right about the translation of the old art style into high fidelity, and I actually love it, but not quite for what I assume was the intended reason. Let me explain. Anime eyes on mutants. So it's clear that there was a decision by the art team to directly and literally translate a lot of the original game's art direction to the remake. We can see this in the boxiness of the level geometry, for example, which I think does a good job of making this game feel like the original. Similarly, I think adding more survival elements than the original had changes its tone to more clearly match the experience of playing System Shock in the 90s. However, the decision to directly translate the old game's sprites to high-fidelity 3D models has led to cartoonish proportions on some of the enemies. So the result is anime eyes on mutants. This softens the jump scares and the general survival horror vibe in a way that I actually appreciate because I am a wee babe.
Even with the care taken to recreate the station and its residents, issues from the old version still remain in the new update. Cyborg bodies often jiggle around after death. Loading a game often sends the physics objects flying around in the air. And there's still the rare Unreal Engine crash. Cause what's an Unreal game without a couple of Unreal Engine crashes, am I right? Audio is a whole different story. The sounds of Citadel Station have all been completely reimagined, and this is a massive change for the better. While the original might have been a classic in its own right, one can easily find themselves turned off by its grating and repetitive sound effects that become a total sensory overload after the first few minutes. The remake replaces every weapon blast and button press with more ear-pleasing alternatives. The one issue lies with some of the balance, especially when it comes to the voice lines and barks of the enemy cyborgs. They are creepy as hell, but they're really hard to hear.
Voice work has been completely redone as well, and is absolutely top-notch.
Dude, what kind of strange device is it, yo? When I touch it, it gets forth a sound. It's got wires that, like, vibrate and give music. What kind of thing did I found?
Terry Brocious has come back to reprise her role as SHODAN and performs immaculately.
You are not welcomed here. Remove yourself.
The various audio logs and emails are all replaced with better performances, overshadowing the lines in the original that sound like a developer was hastily pulled into the vocal booth during their lunch break. Subway sandwich crumbs cascading from their lips.
SHODAN security is closing down on us. The elevators are frozen. Myra keeps saying that it's the cameras and the medical CPU core.
The soundtrack in the remake takes a totally different path. It's far more ambient and subtle, which goes along well with the bigger step into System Shock's horror themes. I do miss those slammin' industrial beats from the original game. But at least we get a nice remix of the unforgettable elevator theme.
On the whole, the remake's presentation comes together to help define it as its own experience, while still retaining most of the elements that made the original so special in the first place, right down to the storyline.
The story of the hacker's journey stays fairly faithful to the source material, but the remake handles the setup of this tale and the delivery of its major plot points with far better grace and pacing than the original game. These days it might be a little harder to see SHODAN as anything but a quaint and outdated concept, especially when real-world AI is being positioned to replace and control many human elements in our economy and media. But when taken at face value as an atmospheric tale of cyberpunk survival, System Shock still serves as a reminder of how damaging the march of technology and corporate overreach can be when left unchecked.
That's something even SHODAN GPT can agree on, I'm sure of it.
Oh, you really think so? Let's find out.
You have saved us all some effort by destroying the greater part of Earth's civilization yourself.
See, nothing to worry about there. Night Dive has taken the storyline a step further by giving the hacker a little bit more personality, whereas in the original they were basically a blank slate. Even though we only really see their hands, the hacker interacts with the world with a little attitude, a little swagger, a confident vibe that comes across when they're doing simple things like using a keycard, or hefting a piece of pipe, or jabbing a flash drive into their arm.
After a drone flight sets the scene, telling us of New Atlanta and the ominous power of Trioptimum Corporation, we also get a little chance to explore the hacker's apartment. We can glean a bit about their interests and hobbies as we poke around. They collect weird action figures, they own a motorcycle, or at least the helmet.
I like to put on my motorcycle helmet and just scream into it.
They can bang out a few tunes from the original game on a space base in the corner here. They like to spend a lot of time playing Space Minotaur on the ever-popular Game Brick. Wait, is that System Shock right there? And as the hacker gets caught downloading some blueprints for impressive headwear, they refuse to go quietly.
Turn around! Now!
As our vision clears, we realize we've been black-bagged and smuggled aboard Citadel Station, where Edward Diago appears via hologram and gives us a Faustian deal to release SHODAN from her ethical bonds. He makes it pretty clear that this is not really a choice. After completing his request, it's lights out once more, and the hacker has to live with the fact that they just sold themselves to a corporation, possibly for the rest of their days.
A quick warning before we continue. The spoiler Cyber Skull has arrived, probing us with nefarious intentions, so we don't forget to remind you that there's a bunch of spoilers for the game ahead. While the remake is a new experience, the story beats are almost identical, so if you care about spoilers for a 30-year-old game, go ahead and advance to the next chapter.
We awaken after a half-year nap to a derelict station.
What kind of piss you would take after a half-year nap?
Although the panicked voice of the security consultant bleeds into our ears to sum up the situation, big laser, deadly virus, weird cyborgs, rogue AI, blah blah blah. We don't really comprehend the gravity of the situation until we start stumbling upon the long dead corpses of the station staff and hear their voices from beyond the grave, giving us vital advice in the audio logs that record their final moments.
Through the logs, we learn that the station's mining laser is powering up for a strike on Earth. The laser controls are on the research floor, but we're trapped on the medical level. And the only way to unlock the elevator is to destroy the CPU nodes on this floor and reduce SHODAN's processing power. After fighting our way through a laser tag arena's worth of cyborgs and blowing the nodes, SHODAN addresses us directly for the first time with this chilling monologue.
Who are you? The computer nodes can be repaired, but you... Who are you? My cameras and sensors scan your body, but you do not match any employee file. When my cyborgs bring you to an electrified interrogation bench,
I will have your secrets.
And you will learn more about pain than you ever wanted to know.
Contrast this with the opening from the original System Shock, which is told entirely from SHODAN's perspective in one giant info-dumping cutscene. The player knows from the start who the main antagonist is, and there's very little mystery. The choice to delay SHODAN's reveal in the remake is an effective tool for creating a slow-burn horror vibe in the opening hours, and feels right at home with the dark tone and deliberate pacing.
With the elevator freed from SHODAN's control, the hacker charges towards the laser controls on the research level, but finds that the laser can't be shut down. The only thing to do is raise the station's radiation shields and fire the laser into them, destroying the weapon completely. Or you can actually just choose to shoot Earth yourself and, game over.
Raising the shields means heading down to the reactor level to power it up and release the safety. We see the effects of SHODAN's virus on the crew as it alters their minds. Some begin to go mad, even worshipping her as a god and sacrificing their colleagues on makeshift altars. Hey, how about that? Upon your return to the laser controls, SHODAN attempts to stop you by unleashing a horde of virus mutants, but you succeed in fending them off and blow up the station's main weapon. However, the mission is far from complete.
SHODAN baits you towards the station's recreation groves, which are now filled with rampaging viral mutants. SHODAN plans to send these groves on a collision course with the Earth, infecting the world's population so they can easily be bent to her will or reduced to organic matter for more experiments. We begin heading up to the executive level to jettison the groves, only to get a frantic message in the elevator. A group of survivors is hiding out on the flight deck.
This side quest turns out to be another trap. When we get to the survivors, they've already been torn to pieces, and a formidable Cortex Reaver is busy frying the brains of the last human. Here we have System Shock's first boss fight, and it's a tough one if you're unprepared. After making the Reaver eat enough grenades, we head back to the executive level, only to find ourselves faced with a host of haywire exec bots patrolling the halls, and gorilla tiger hybrids feasting on the remains of the executive staff. Worse still, the jettison controls for the groves have all been destroyed and rerouted by SHODAN's robot army.
This necessitates traveling through the virus-filled groves in order to deactivate the safety locks from within, then using the master jettison switch to enable the launch and send the virus into the far reaches of space. A lot more creative freedom was taken here in remaking the groves, and there's even a couple cool set pieces like this giant workable chessboard. Sure is a shame that everything inside wants to murder you or melt your face off with virus stuff.
Once the safety interlocks are turned off, we crawl through the maintenance tunnels of the executive level to reach the master jettison control, but a familiar foe blocks the path. It's Big Daddy Diego, all borged out after forming an alliance with SHODAN and selling out his corpo buddies. Diego drops pretty quickly after a few swings of the laser rapier, and teleports away to fight another day. We flip the master jettison switch and... it's broken. This one's busted. A trip down to the claustrophobic corridors in the maintenance level, a severed head, and a little bit of troubleshooting, as well as a lot of regular shooting, am I right? Is all it takes to reroute the necessary relays. During the process, we learned that a Resistance member has figured out a way to program an isolinear chipset that's capable of shutting SHODAN down. But the chipset has to be installed on the bridge, which is currently out of our reach. Finally, we launch Beta Grove out into the big black beyond.
But this still isn't enough to stop SHODAN's machinations. The comm arrays are powering up on the system's engineering level above, and SHODAN is getting ready to beam her entire consciousness into Earth's communications network. Slowly stepping our way through the dark, treacherous cyber hell of engineering, we locate and destroy each of the station's antennas, which of course SHODAN has deviously trapped and guarded.
make yourself comfortable, hacker. Stay a while.
Rebecca Lansing finally manages to get through to us again. Remember her from the beginning of the game? Anyway, she gives the go-ahead to blow the station out of orbit and take off in a shuttle, leaving this huge nightmare behind us.
Like everything else, causing a reactor meltdown is far from simple. It requires a master destruct code, the fragments of which reside in every CPU node room on the station. After gathering the code, we enter it into the reactor and make a break for the flight deck. SHODAN is understandably pissed that we're blowing up what's basically her entire physical body. She sends out an army of security droids to block our path. Right before managing to reach the shuttle bay, we also get a surprise visit from her boy toy Diego. A little berserk patch and Ben Kenobi action takes him out once more, and we race into the shuttle cockpit, only to find that SHODAN has disabled all the escape craft. We're trapped, and the only way to come out alive is to put this rogue AI back into its cartridge.
SHODAN plans to separate the bridge from the rest of the station, and it's up to us to fight our way through the security level before that happens. This floor is an extremely vertical maze filled with the toughest opponents yet, and the goal is to extend an energy bridge at the top of this dizzying corridor to reach SHODAN's core. Fortunately, we can find a cool-ass railgun and a plasma weapon that fires deadly bouncing ping-pong balls to make our trip a little easier. A long, bloody struggle ensues, but after pushing through a warehouse's worth of security Roombas and roided up cyborgs, we finally climb the long ladder to the bridge.
I'm still in a dream, snake eater.
Diego waits at the top in his final form. He wants to 1v1 us in this arena full of pink goo tubes, and the trusty laser sword isn't quite enough to take him down this time. It's a tough fight, but with the deadly combo of rocket boots, reflex patches, and railguns, we avoid his hail of grenades.
With Diego gone for good, the bridge finishes its separation sequence. We get a cutscene witnessing the destruction of the rest of Citadel Station and head towards a SHODAN showdown on the bridge. Visiting the four corners of the final floor, we lower SHODAN's remaining physical defenses and find the isolinear chipset, which is guarded by yet another Cortex Reaver. We also have to fight through this super shitty Autobomb maze, one of the less desirable holdovers from the original game. We install the chipset and blast our way to SHODAN's access point, deleting a huge host of cyborgs and yet another Cortex Reaver.
At last, we enter cyberspace to shut down SHODAN for good and put her back under the ice. The ending sequence in the original game is maybe the most unsatisfying and controversial section, which just has you blasting away at SHODAN with your boring cyberspace weapons. In the 1.0 version of the remake, it's a lateral move at best. Without revealing it here, we'll just say the ending sequence is vastly improved in patch 1.2, changing the end battle into a combination of action and puzzle that makes the game's closing moments much more satisfying and sets the stage for System Shock 2.
Dang. Well, there you have it. That was a lot of System Shock. And if you've gotten this far in the video, we'd like to take a moment to thank you for joining us on this journey back through the cold, dark hallways of Citadel Station. If you want to support us directly, you can always toss a few Mario coins our way by tipping on our Ko-Fi page, or becoming a member of the Heroes Table on our humble Patreon. It costs just 2 tasty chocolate-filled Triop coins to get earlier access to new videos and polls, and get your name prominently displayed alongside these valiant warriors. Higher tiers also get additional benefits like a special role on the Dungenerator Discord, or a shout out to the heavens, such as the illustrious Wolfgang Bristol.
But if rogue AIs stole your job and you're finding yourself a bit short at the moment, you can still help out by taking a moment to feed the big scary algorithm with a like and a share and subscribing to the channel. And if you've got some thoughts on the System Shock remake or the original game, or just want to spitball about SHODAN, take a moment and tell us down in the comments. It really helps us out a ton.
Let's jack back into cyberspace and wrap this up.
Jack it up! System Shock endures for many reasons, but its greatest strength lies in making the player feel clever and resourceful. Even though AI's threat to humanity might be a little more subtle than the overt danger SHODAN presents, at its core this is a story about surviving against impossible odds and defeating a devious enemy. And there's no question that it left a profound impression on gamers and developers over the last 3 decades since its release. Some of the most critically acclaimed and treasured titles out there can trace their roots back to this cult classic.
Now that the 1.2 patch has finally seen the glow of our monitors, it's safe to say that the System Shock remake is the best way to experience the story of Citadel Station. It's not an entirely perfect game, and some of the design will feel dated right from the start, but this is clearly a labor of love, put together by passionate people that have a profound understanding of what made the original such an enduring masterpiece.
Whether you enjoy blasting mutants into chum with a beefy shotgun, or picking up everything in a room and putting it into your inventory delicately, System Shock has something for you.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next Two-Headed Hero.
Say goodbye, SHODAN GPT.
Goodbye, SHODAN GPT.
Rot in my husk, irritant.
We shall never speak again.